Eli Langford hadn't planned to paint anything. Not at first. The barn came with the property. A broad weathered structure, nestled against the tree line at the far edge of his 3-acre plot. He'd bought the land for its seclusion, tired of city noise and HOA entanglements. So when the real estate agent had laughed and said, "You're technically inside the Whispering Pines HOA boundary, but they never come up this far," Eli didn't think much of it. That changed 3 months later, when he picked up a brush. It started with a simple image: a storm brewing over golden fields, horses rearing under wild skies, and a cloaked figure holding a lantern against the wind. The mural stretched across the barn's south wall, and as Eli painted, it grew on its own, like the colors were telling him what came next. He lost track of time, letting instinct guide the brush. The process wasn't like any art he'd done before. It felt haunted, alive. Neighbors who wandered by during hikes or while walking their dogs stopped to admire it. "Striking," one man said, snapping a picture. "Beautifully eerie," added an older woman, trailing her fingers along the painted horizon. But not everyone liked it. 3 days after the mural's completion, a letter arrived, folded into thirds with military precision, and delivered in an unmarked envelope. It was stamped with the familiar green and gold HOA logo. The message was brief: "Mr. Langford, your recent exterior alteration to the structure on Lot 47 violates Article 8, Section D, Visual Harmony and Community Standards. Your mural is to be removed within 15 calendar days, or you will incur a fine of $500 per day until the violation is resolved. Regards, Karen Melrose, President, Whispering Pines, HOA." Eli read it twice, then a third time. Visual harmony. He stepped outside and looked at the barn in the fading afternoon light. The horses were mid-gallop, their hooves kicking up painted dust. The figure with the lantern now appeared to be looking directly at him. Was it too bold? Too colorful? Offensive? How? The next morning, he drove down the winding road to the HOA's main office, a white building with identical planters and polished stone steps. It was as lifeless as a DMV. Inside, a receptionist directed him to a conference room. There, behind a long table, sat 4 HOA board members. Karen Melrose was in the center, tight, bun, pearl necklace, and an expression that had been carved into stone decades ago. "I received your letter," Eli began, trying to keep his voice even. "Yes," Karen said, without looking up from a folder. "The mural. You need to remove it." He sat across from her. "Can you explain what part of it violates the standards?" "It's on my private property. Not even visible from the main road." Karen finally met his eyes. "That's not the point. It's unsettling. We've received complaints." "From who?" "Anonymous members. They say it feels threatening. Like it's watching them." Eli blinked. "It's a painting. Intent matters less than impact, Mr. Langford," she replied, folding her hands. 15 days. As he left the building, he passed a man loitering by the exit, dressed in plain black with a notepad in hand. The stranger gave Eli a look that made his skin crawl, a smile that didn't reach the eyes. He whispered something too low to hear, then turned and vanished down the corridor. That night, Eli stood in front of the barn as the wind picked up, rustling the trees. The lantern in the painting seemed to glow faintly in the dark, and he wondered, what had he really painted? Eli didn't sleep that night, even with the doors locked and curtains drawn. He felt exposed, like something was observing him through the walls. Just before dawn, he stepped outside, drawn to the barn. The air was unusually still. The mural loomed in the weak grey light, and though he'd painted it with his own hands, something about it felt foreign now. Unfamiliar, the cloaked figure. At the center of the mural, the one holding the lantern, seemed slightly different. Eli approached slowly. The brushstrokes around its face looked more detailed than he remembered. Its expression had changed. Hadn't it been blank before? Now it almost looked mournful. He shook it off, telling himself he was imagining things. Paint couldn't shift on its own. Still, he took out his phone and snapped a photo of the figure, just in case. Later that morning, Eli returned to the HOA office, determined to talk sense into Karen Melrose. As he stepped into the lobby, the same receptionist gave him a tight smile and buzzed him through. Karen was already in the meeting room, flipping through papers. This time, she wasn't alone. Seated beside her was the man from the hallway the day before, the one with the too calm smile. Now, he wore a name tag. Russell Dane, compliance consultant. Mr. Langford, Karen said curtly. Back so soon. I want to appeal the decision. Eli replied, There's nothing in your bylaws about private barns, and the mural doesn't face any public road. Russell looked up and smiled. The issue isn't technical. It's atmospheric. Art can change the character of a neighborhood, especially art that provokes unease. Karen nodded in agreement. Several residents reported that the mural evokes a hostile emotional response. One described it as, a warning. Eli blinked. A warning of what? They didn't answer. Instead, Karen leaned forward. 15 days, Mr. Langford. We've already mailed a second notice. Before he could respond, Russell stood and offered him a folded slip of paper. We took the liberty of having the mural photographed and digitally altered to fit better with community aesthetics. You'll find a mock-up inside, muted tones, simpler imagery, no figures. Eli opened the paper. It was a bland beige wall, the kind you'd expect in a dentist's office. That's not art, he said. That's approved. Russell replied smoothly. As he turned to leave, Karen added one final comment. This isn't just about the painting, Mr. Langford. We expect compliance across the board. You may want to review your landscaping next. Outside, the air felt thicker. Like a storm was coming. Eli gripped the mock-up in his fist, crumpling it. He didn't know what kind of game they were playing. But one thing was clear. This wasn't about visual harmony. It was about control. That evening, as he reviewed the photo he had taken earlier, something made his heart skip. The mural's figure. It wasn't the same as the one he'd seen that morning. In the photo, the face was more abstract, barely defined, but now, as he looked out the window at the real mural bathed in moonlight, the figure's face had changed again. It looked more human, and it looked afraid. Days passed, but Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every time he looked at the mural, it seemed to pulse with a quiet life, as if the colors shifted just beneath the surface. One morning, as the first sunlight spilled over the horizon, Eli stood before the barn and noticed details he was certain hadn't been there before. Faint shapes lurking in the storm clouds, eyes that glinted like distant stars, figures woven into the twisting branches of painted trees that hadn't been on the barn the day before, shadows forming vague humanoid shapes. He touched the wood, tracing the shapes with a trembling finger. His heart pounded. Had the wind or rain somehow altered the paint? Impossible. Oil paint doesn't just change itself overnight. That afternoon, Eli found a small envelope slipped under his front door. Inside was a single, neatly folded note in spidery handwriting. Finish it. The story isn't over. No signature. No return address. Eli's mind raced. Was it a prank, a warning, or something else? He decided to take a break and drove to town. At the local cafe, he asked around, casually showing a picture of his mural on his phone. Reactions varied. The eyes in the clouds. An elderly man, said, peering over his glasses. That's the mark of old legends. They say the spirits watch from the storms. A young woman, overhearing, whispered. I heard the old trust that funded the HOA was tied to secret societies. They're protective. Maybe jealous of your mural. Eli was intrigued. The rumors didn't explain the change in the painting, but they hinted at something deeper. That night, as Eli returned home, he found fresh paintbrush strokes on the barn. Small deliberate additions in black and deep red. A staircase winding up the side of the barn appeared, leading nowhere but into the painted storm. A closed door appeared beneath the lantern-bearing figure, one Eli was sure he hadn't painted. His breath caught. Who had done this? Determined to catch whoever was sneaking around, Eli set up a motion-sensitive camera, trained on the barn. At midnight, he was awakened by a faint clicking sound. He raced outside, heart hammering in the cold air. The camera's red light blinked as it recorded. Movement. Eli peeked at the screen. A shadowy figure crouched near the barn, moving swiftly, brushing paint onto the wall. Hey! Eli shouted. The figure froze, then vanished into the darkness. The next day, Eli reviewed the footage. The face was hidden beneath a hood, but the hands, thin and pale, were unmistakably human. He showed the video to the local historian, Marianne, who arrived that afternoon with a pile of old books. She scanned the footage, then frowned. This mural is more than art, she said softly. These symbols you're describing, they appear in the records of the old Whispering Pines Trust. The trust was disbanded decades ago, but their rituals, they involved marking places to guard secrets. Secrets? Eli asked, his voice low. Marianne nodded. Places like your barn. Doors painted to keep something in or out. That evening, Eli stood before the barn again, tracing the lines of the painted door. It shimmered faintly in the fading light, a barrier between two worlds. His phone buzzed. Another message. You've awakened the story. Will you finish it before it finishes you? The next morning dawned cold and grey. The kind of day where even the sun seemed hesitant to rise. Eli hadn't slept much. The message haunted his thoughts, twisting them like the storm clouds in his mural. Just as he stepped outside to feed his chickens, a black SUV rolled up the gravel road and came to a smooth stop in front of his barn. The windows were tinted, but a man stepped out, tall, thin, impeccably dressed in a dark suit. His eyes were sharp, scanning every inch of the property with unnerving precision. Mr. Langford. The man's voice was calm, almost clinical. That's me, Eli replied, wary. I'm Russell Dane, compliance and safety consultant for the Whispering Pines HOA, the man said, flashing a badge. Eli felt a chill. What brings you here? Russell smiled thinly. Routine inspection. Routine. Eli knew better. The HOA rarely sent anyone out this far. Usually they just sent letters. He nodded, forcing calm. Walk with me, Russell said, and they circled the barn together. Russell paused in front of the mural's painted door. Interesting choice, he said, tapping his chin. That figure holding the lantern. Symbolic. Eli forced a shrug. Just part of the local legend. Russell's gaze lingered on the door. And this door looks solid. How thick is the barn wall behind it? Same as everywhere else, Eli replied. It's just paint. Russell's eyes narrowed. Some paint can hide more than you think. Later, as Russell photographed the mural, focusing particularly on the painted door and lantern figure, Eli noticed his phone buzzing repeatedly. But when he checked, no messages, just a blank screen. Lost signal, Eli asked. Russell glanced up, smiled tight. Remote area, happens often. The inspection stretched into hours. Russell measured, photographed, scribbled notes. Eli tried to keep up, but unease gnawed at him. As dusk settled, Russell packed his gear. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Langford," he said smoothly. "I'll be in touch." That night, Eli set up cameras around the barn's perimeter, refusing to be caught off guard again. He stared at the mural, the painted lantern's faint glow, almost visible in the moonlight. At midnight, the cameras clicked on. Movement. A shadow flitted by, too quick to see clearly. Eli grabbed his flashlight and raced outside. "Who's there?" His voice cracked in the cold. No answer. Then a whisper, barely audible, drifted on the breeze. "Finish it!" His flashlight beam landed on the painted door, where a faint shimmer rippled across the surface. Like heat waves on asphalt, Eli stepped closer. Suddenly, the barn trembled. The sound of a distant door creaking echoed. Frozen, Eli stared as the painted door's edges seemed to loosen, curling away from the wood like peeling wallpaper, and then the door swung open. Nothing but darkness beyond. Eli's breath caught. He heard a soft voice from within the blackness. "Will you come in?" Eli's heart pounded like a drum in his chest. The painted door on his barn, an image he had thought was nothing more than brush and pigment, now hung open like a portal, revealing a swirling blackness deeper than any shadow. He wanted to turn away, to slam the barn door shut and never paint again, but something stronger pulled him forward. "Who's there?" Eli called out, voice barely a whisper. No answer, only the faintest pulse of cold air pressed against his skin. The lantern figure from the mural seemed to glow softly, as if urging him on. Eli stepped closer, his boots crunching on gravel. He reached out a trembling hand toward the darkness. The moment his fingers brushed the edge of the painted door frame, a rush of wind surged through the clearing. The world around him twisted, colors bending, sounds warping, and he was pulled inside. Suddenly, Eli found himself standing in a vast field, under a stormy sky, but it was different. The air tasted older, heavier. The horses from his mural galloped past, flesh and bone, rather than paint, their eyes wild and knowing. He turned to see the lantern figure, the cloaked stranger, standing not as paint, but flesh and blood, lantern in hand, face illuminated by its eerie glow. "You have opened the door," the figure said softly, voice echoing like a distant bell. "Now, the story moves forward." Eli tried to speak, but found no words. "Many have tried to ignore the warnings," the figure continued. "But the art remembers. It protects. It demands." A whirlwind of memories and images flashed before Eli's eyes, of the old whispering pines' trust, their rituals to guard ancient secrets, their pact to seal away a darkness that could consume the land. "You hold the key," the figure said. "Will you choose to finish the story, or will you turn away and leave it to unravel?" Eli swallowed hard. "What happens if I refuse?" The figure's eyes grew dark. The barrier weakens. The darkness spills out. This community, your home, will fall. Eli glanced back toward the barn's open door behind him. It shimmered like a tear in reality. "I don't know what to do," Eli admitted, fear clawing at him. The figure extended the lantern toward Eli. "Complete the mural. Add the final piece. Only then will the door close and the threat be sealed once more." Suddenly, Eli was yanked backward, tumbling through a blur of light and sound. He landed hard on the gravel outside his barn, gasping for breath. The painted door had closed and merged seamlessly back into the wall. His hand shook violently. The night was silent. Morning light crept over the horizon as Eli staggered inside, clutching the old paintbrushes he had left untouched since the mural's first stroke. He knew what he had to do, but the question remained, could he finish what the mural demanded? Before the darkness found a way out, Eli spent the next morning in a restless daze. The encounter with the cloaked figure and the surreal vision of the other world haunted his every thought, yet the urgency pressed down on him like a weight he could not shrug off. He gathered his brushes and paints in the small studio behind the barn, the very place where the mural had first taken shape. The empty canvas before him wasn't the usual one. This was the barn wall itself, still cold and rough under his fingertips. His mind raced, replaying the figure's words. Complete the mural, add the final piece. But what was the final piece? As he stared, the shadows around the barn seemed to thicken, curling like smoke on a windless night. Suddenly the barn door creaked. Eli's heart jumped. No one was there, or so he thought. He glanced at the mural. Blank space, where the final painting was meant to be. A faint whisper floated on the air, almost lost beneath the rustling leaves. Hurry! Eli's hands trembled as he dipped his brush into the blackest paint. The strokes came slowly at first, hesitant, then with more confidence. Shapes took form, a swirling vortex, shadows clawing upward, faint faces twisting in silent screams. Hours passed, the daylight fading into deep twilight. His breath fogged in the cold air, the barn seeming to shrink around him. Outside, lights flickered across the neighborhood. Eli knew the HOA was watching, waiting for him to fail so they could enforce their control again. But now, it was more than just a fight over aesthetics. It was a fight for something ancient, something far older than rules and regulations. As the last stroke dried, Eli stepped back. The mural pulsed softly. A heartbeat beneath the paint. The painted door shimmered faintly. He waited. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Eli exhaled, relief flooding him. But then, the barn trembled again. A deep, low vibration that shook the wooden beams. The painted door began to glow with a soft golden light. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the doorway. Not painted, not shadow, but real. It was the cloaked lantern bearer. Thank you, the figure said, voice calm and steady. But this is not the end. Eli's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? The barrier is sealed. But the balance is fragile. The darkness seeks another way. You must be vigilant. The figure stepped through the door, which closed silently behind them. Eli felt the warmth of the lantern's light in his hand, though he held nothing. Keep this with you, the figure said. It will guide you when the shadows rise. Before Eli could respond, the figure faded like mist. The barn was silent again. But Eli knew the storm was far from over. Despite the eerie encounter and the mysterious glowing mural, life in the Whispering Pines community returned to a fragile calm. Or so it seemed. Eli's barn had become the silent battleground of forces far beyond the usual HOA disputes. But the HOA itself was growing restless. Karen Melrose, the ever-watchful HOA president, had received reports from several neighbors. Claims that the mural was now haunting, unnerving, even dangerous. One evening, as Eli was putting the finishing touches on the barn's exterior, a sharp knock shattered the silence. He opened the door to find Karen standing there, flanked by two men in suits. Their faces were grim, their eyes cold. We've had enough, Mr. Langford, Karen said with thinly veiled menace. This mural must come down. It's a threat to community harmony and property values. Eli held up his hand. It's art, and it's mine. The mural stays. Karen smiled, but there was no warmth. The board has voted unanimously. You will remove it within 7 days, or face legal action, Before Eli could protest, one of the men handed him an official-looking document, an eviction notice for violation of community standards. He slammed the door shut and leaned against it, heart pounding. That night, Eli sat alone in the barn. The lantern's glow, faint but steady. The mural seemed alive in the dim light, watching. His phone buzzed. New message appeared. They will try to stop you. Be ready. The next day, Eli found strange tracks near the barn. Deep impressions in the soft soil, like the marks of something large and heavy. His unease deepened. Determined not to back down, Eli reached out to Marianne, the local historian, who had helped unravel the mural's secrets. Karen and the HOA, he told her. They don't want this mystery uncovered. I think they're scared. Marianne nodded. The old trust's influence runs deep. They'll use every tool at their disposal. As days passed, strange occurrences escalated. Lights flickered inside the barn. Shadows darted just beyond sight. And Eli found himself waking to whispers that no one else could hear. Then, late one evening, the barn door creaked open on its own. Eli rushed outside to find the painted door glowing fiercely, the lantern figure standing at the threshold, its face etched with urgency. Prepare yourself, it warned. The darkness is stirring again. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Eli gripped the lantern's invisible light, steeling himself. The battle for the barn, and the secrets it guarded, was far from over. The night was thick with tension, shadows clutching the edges of the Whispering Pines community, as if waiting for a signal to strike. Eli stood before his barn, the mural glowing softly, the painted door shimmering like a living thing. The air hummed with an electric charge, and the familiar figure holding the lantern appeared once again, stepping out from the painting to stand beside him. We have little time, the figure said, voice steady but urgent. The darkness grows stronger. The HOA's efforts are more than control. They are attempts to silence what protects this land. Eli clenched his fists. How do I stop it? How do I finish this? The lantern's light pulsed brighter, illuminating a new image emerging. On the mural, a final hidden piece. A majestic phoenix rising from swirling flames. Its wings unfurled in triumph. The phoenix, Eli whispered. A symbol of rebirth and power. Yes, the figure replied. You must paint it, with purpose and heart. Only then will the barrier hold. Eli reached for the brushes, mixing colors with a steady hand, despite the quiver in his soul. As the phoenix took shape, flames licking the barn's wooden surface, the darkness around them recoiled, retreating like a tide pulled back by an unseen force. Suddenly the glow flared, and then the barn door slammed shut. From inside the barn, a deep roar echoed, neither beast nor man, but something ancient, trapped, and struggling. Eli's breath hitched. The final piece was not just art. It was a seal, a prison, a last defense. When the roar subsided, the barn's surface was still once more, the mural now brilliant and complete. The painted door vanished, blending seamlessly into the barn wall. Eli felt the lantern's warmth fade, but left a lasting imprint in his chest. A silent promise. The next morning, the HOA's eviction notice had disappeared. Karen Melrose herself came to Eli's door, her expression softer, tinged with reluctant respect. We understand now, she said quietly. The mural stays, and so do you. But as she turned away, Eli noticed something. A faint flicker behind her eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. Because though the darkness had been sealed, the story was far from over. Eli smiled faintly, the weight of the masterpiece resting on his shoulders. He glanced back at the barn, and wondered what other secrets lay hidden behind the paint.